Welcome back to Origins. This is our bonus Minisode edition. This is the podcast that dives deep into the business of venture capital, where we learn how the people behind the capital, both GPs and LPs, make decisions. I'm Nick Chirls, GP at Asylum Ventures.
And I'm Beezer Clarkson, your LP co-host from Sapphire Partners, where we aim to invest in exceptional early-stage venture capital managers ranging from emerging to established franchise VCs. And I'm excited today to unpack our recent conversation with Tomasz, and I'm just so happy, again, I'm just going to say it, Nick, to have you back in the co-seat.
It's good to be back, Beezer, and out of the house with all these kids. Never been so happy to be back at work. So this is where I want to start. Should Asylum Ventures raise Fund 2 12 to 18 months ahead of plan?
Okay, so out of that whole episode, that's your leading question? It's not, should you use AI to be a tiny firm for forever and then go public?
I mean, do you get that? I mean, Tomasz is maybe a special case, but like, what's your typical reaction to something like that in this market today? Like, is Tomasz like truly one of one?
So what I would say is Tomasz is not an N of one, but he's N of few. And you will see LPs in any market. But it is more obvious, I think, now in this market where there are fewer firms that are emerging, that are creating this kind of pull, where folks will reach out and be open to early fundraising. We see this, and you'll get this too, I'm sure, where people will say, hey, when you next raise, and we're ready to go now, when we've done our work. And it's the preemptive round thing equivalent in the LP world. This happens consistently. We've seen it in every market. But then if you don't then start your fund within 12 or 18 months, because sometimes, and this is not a theory comment at all, I've seen it in other funds, where then the market slows down or whatever happens, and all of a sudden LPs have committed 2 years in advance, then they start getting upset. Because that's this weirdness in their world of committed capital that you have to then earmark and you can't use. So it is a balancing act.
This might not be true, but you also you better be sure you can get it done, right? Because it's like you go to your existing LPs and you're like, hey, we're raising 12 to 18 months early. And then maybe the folks that were like preempting aren't as real as you think. And then you're like, oh, actually, never mind. Like that probably isn't a great trust building exercise. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I've seen funds test the water, usually with the LPAC. And it will clarify very quickly if the new people are able to, and then how much conviction and interest in sort of spending forward of your existing LPs. So you're right. There is these points where you'll find out quickly.
Yeah, like if it's not real, it's probably not a great look.
Correct. Or insufficient. You may have a check, I'm just making this up, that 10 or 15% of your next fund, but it's not the whole thing. It does clarify. But on preponderance of time, if people are that interested, there's usually enough, in my experience, going on in the GP that the other LPs are going to go along too. It's just sooner than they expected. I feel like usually that's the portfolio is in a position of strength. So that pulls in. So it's something that struck me. At one level, Tomasz is so thoughtful and clear in his thinking. It doesn't surprise me that he said it. It doesn't surprise me that he had this experience and you had this experience, but it underscores for me why it's so much harder for other folks to raise is exactly what he said about the clarity of customer segmentation. Who am I serving? Why am I serving it? The persistence of that theory. I'm sure you use the word theory because it's redundant with his name of his firm, but just you're very clear what Asylum is. He's really clear on theory. I expect that resonates with your founders. It resonates with LPs, and it gives you that predictability and instilling of confidence that he spoke about. And from how is it that some people can raise during this market and some people can't? There's a significant component to that. And then he also was being very polite. His track record was also a factor, right? I mean, he's got a book of business from his past investing that was a big deal in his underwriting, right?
He said it, so I don't need to say it again. But I've always believed that counterpositioning as any form of marketing is powerful. And I mean, he used the example of Andreessen, right? Like the operator founder, I mean, they had their own version of it back when where VCs are spreadsheet people and we're founder people. Now, oddly enough, I think they might be spreadsheet people. And so with notation, once upon a time, pre-seed, I felt like was an effective counter-positioning measure, 10, 12 years ago. Now we're sort of using the big bad AUM firm, big banks, as a counter-positioning measure. I actually think maybe the more interesting question around counter-positioning is, if you're right, that then becomes the market. And then where do you go from there? So for example, pre-seed, I don't mean to pat ourselves on the back, but like we were right. Like there became a large market, identifiable market around pre-seed financing. And it no longer became a place to counterposition.
Mm-hmm.
It actually just became the sort of market standard. Just one question in my mind as I think about Asylum, I'm sure Tomasz is thinking about it, is like, yeah, how do you stay relevant? And he also used a good example with Andreessen of sort of different chapters of the firm,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like different big chapters. And so it's like, it's actually hard to find, the counter-positioning thing is difficult to maintain over a very, very long period of time, maybe 5 to 10 years, but beyond that, it's actually harder to the extent that you're actually right.
It ties together in my mind your comments about experimentation and continuing to evolve, and that mindset being so integral to being a sustainable firm. And I would suggest that even to your point about maybe Andreessen is now much larger and it's hard to see them in the same light as a scrappy new fund, but yet they continue to experiment and create new narratives in the market. And there are a whole bunch of firms that do not. And they might be great investors anyway. So they might be picking the right founders, and that doesn't speak to that side of the business. But you can see who consistently evolves their dialogue versus folks that are, I would say, more general venture discussion.
We're talking about marketing for ultimately to founders, right? How do you position the firm to founders, which is, in my view, your core customer? But there's another component, which is then how do you message it to you, to the LP, to the partner, and like, how do you do that in such a way and evolve the firm in such a way where they're not like, holy shit, what did we invest in?
Thank you.
I don't know if you've seen maybe good examples or like bad examples of that. You don't have to name names or name firms, but I'm curious, like, forget about generational transition. I'm just talking about like strategy transition, or like positioning transition.
We've seen this, but and again, I feel a bit guilty of talking the book of origins, but I'm going to anyway. Having some of these other LPs on to talk about how firms sustained and or damaged their business by extending strategies I'm super curious, because we see our world, but I want to see everybody's world because I'm curious / Snoopy. And there's a consistency of if you expand your strategy, why are you doing it? And being very thoughtful and deliberate. And there can be proactive competitive advantages. I'm picking a new counter position. That wasn't language people use, but now I'm wondering about it, given this conversation, which got my brain going. And there's other ones, which is, well, you had to respond to the market. So it's a little bit of a defensive move. And we've heard this all the time. Mm-hmm. I need my later stage fund or my earlier stage fund, pick your whatever, because someone else is coming in and going to own my business. And the guidance there has been, that could be true. We all have to be defensive some days, but still know why you're doing it and how you're going to win. And where it feels to not land is when, this sounds so obvious, but when it's more of I want to say a Me Too product that's just undifferentiated. Because I agree with you, the customer is the founder. And if you can't win the best founder in your area doing what you want, that's the game. And do these counter-positioning, do these new strategies, do they win with the best people? Because the LPs will follow if you find the right people. I have no doubt. So you tell me, do founders like counter-positioning or do they want same? Does it depend? This is your side of the business.
Well, I want to talk about yours because you've expanded your business, right? I want to know the decision behind that. I would just say that like you need to pick like a place to start. The courageous part of that is like actually saying no or saying we're not going to build something for big segments of the market and being comfortable like living in that. Like we're not going to be for everybody. So this message is not going to speak to a big part of the market. I mean, just using Asylum definitely doesn't speak to the whole market, for founders that are like hoping to go raise, $15 million and work with a multi-stage firm and go down the whole constant venture treadmill thing. Probably not going to pick Asylum. So and I think you just have to like live in that comfort of not being able to speak to everybody.
Maybe this is part of what Tomasz said, which I thought, again, I love how he articulates things because it organizes my thoughts so nicely. When he was saying it's part of the evolution of venture, that customer segments differ and arise over different times, and firms go through these spinning people out and getting bigger. And it is exactly this. People go from serving their specific audiences to more, and then people will spin out and pick another specific audience. But is it the circle of life of venture? I'm not going to start singing, but it feels a bit that way.
Yeah, it's the growing up, it's the institutionalization, it's the expansion of the market and the asset class. Have you seen any, like, I'm leaving General Catalyst to go build the next General Catalyst?
I would posit and say I'm sure there are. I think it's much obviously harder to raise, I'm assuming you're talking about a new fund that's 500 million or north.
Yeah, and with the specific intention of growing to many, many, many billions.
I was going to say, I don't know Lee Fixel's ultimate ambition, but he raised, I want to say $1 billion for his first vehicle, if memory serves.
That's an example, but there's not many.
In that case, I would presume it would be nearly impossible to do without significant track record. And to your point, which I thought was so interesting about the accessibility of LPs, you need to know multiple deep-pocketed or big-pocketed, whatever the right word is, LP base, which I don't think is typical in the venture industry unless you've been at a big platform. And I would say people are now more cognizant of meeting LPs so that they can fundraise in the future, but that didn't used to be a thing. So there's that duality of it.
This is maybe a very tactical question. I don't know if you can answer, but like, does someone like Tomasz go in the emerging manager?
He's in the emerging manager. Yeah. It's a technical definition. It's funds 1 through 3, institutional funds 1 through 3. So if Tomasz had done a pilot $5 million fund on Angel List, his fund 2 would count as we wouldn't change the number on it, but mentally it's a fund 1. It's just very formulaic. We keep it super simple. US focused, US GPs, because CalSTRS is a US pension, and that's they drive the focus there. That's their choice. But yeah, so you can be an experienced investor spinning out and still go in that bucket. You're gonna send me friends? You have sent me friends.
Yeah.
We've invested in your friends.
I'm waiting for my little Carrie venture partner. I'm kidding.
I'll take you to dinner. I'll babysit your kids for free.
I appreciate helping them and putting them in touch with, our longest standing partner in LP.
Well, thank you.
Gives me joy. In my next career, I will be a placement agent.
Are you serious?
No.
You just come work with us. If you want to be an LP, I assume you just call me.
That was a joke that I didn't get a laugh from.
Well, I always take you seriously.
You did for a second. I had you.
I know. I was like, really? Shit.
No. My next career, I'll be a barista.
We should wrap. We've got off.
All right.
We're off the reservation.
Thanks for listening to this minisode of Origins, the show where we discuss the venture capital ecosystem through the lens of myself, a GP at Asylum Ventures, and Beezer, an LP at Sapphire Partners.
We'll be back soon with a new episode of Origins. You can find that right here in this feed. And while you're there, please rate and review the podcast. It's super helpful for other folks looking for venture insights to find our show, and really helpful for Nick and I to know what you want to hear. I'm Beezer Clarkson.
And I'm Nick Chirls, and we'll be back soon. Thank you for listening.